Hey fisherman, Aqua Duelist here. And I was talking with a friend earlier today just about, budget deck cores essentially we've picked up because, they're just so cheap and, we're interested in them, like kind of like almost a what are we really losing by picking these up essentially. And not including structured decks because that's like an automatic, kind of like budget thing right there. I really do feel like Dual Avatars is just one of the best budget decks to pick up. Now, I have a few reasons on why I think just this is an amazing budget to pick up. And the first one is obviously the price. Gonna talk about that real quick because we kind of have to. This deck core is honestly like under $10. Like at this point, Dual Avatar Invitation is the most expensive card for the deck core. You play three of it, and it's a secret rare sitting at $1. I'm very surprised to see this just sitting at $1. For the longest time, this card was, sitting at like $2. And to see it finally go down to $1 is kind of crazy to me. But yeah, that's the most expensive card that the deck just has. Everything else is essentially, pennies onto maybe like a quarter. I think the most expensive card under invitation is probably like the tokens, if I remember correctly. They're from the OTS pack that released alongside Phantom Rage, which is basically the set that this was introduced in. Then you got a couple cards in Blazing Vortex, so it's not like super old but super recent, kind of like in this weird middle ground. So for the price you're getting for what the deck does, I think it's really insane for the value. Now, what does this deck do if you're not familiar with it? Basically, you make some tokens and you fusion summon. Invitation is a fusion spell, arguably one of the best fusion spells in the game mechanically, where basically you get a bunch of tokens, you fusion twice. So what you do essentially is you play Dual Avatar Fist to get into, which gets you this card, and Fist is just super easy to get to. You have the field spell, which gets you Fist from deck. You have Terraforming. You can play Fusion Deployment to get to Fist. So you can at least play 10 copies of Fist right there. Basically meaning you have 13 copies of Invitation, and you could also play Dual Avatar Compact, which basically banishes Invitation from the grave, and Compact basically becomes that card's effect. So you basically play like 16 copies of Invitation. That's pretty insane when you look at, just consistency right there. Like, that's freaking awesome. Now, something else I think that's pretty cool about this deck is the fact that it's not only, just, negates, because it has some negates, but it also has interruptions. What do I mean by that? So when I think of, like, negates, I think of something like Totally Awesome and Borreload Savage Dragon. Like, those are just the first two cards I think that come to mind that just, negate. Now, interruptions I feel are a bit different than negates. You have a card, or you have a fusion monster that basically just pops an opponent's monster on summon. There's actually a trap that lets you get into that during your opponent's turn. So basically, you're not negating anything, you're popping an opponent's monster, kind of like interrupting their play. That's what I mean. This deck just doesn't focus on, negates. It uses this weird mix of both, which I kind of like. And then with that, you do have the concept of basically keeping two fusions on the field, basically, which I think is kind of, like a little unique. Like, honestly, like, just the whole little thing that this deck's got going on, I think is pretty freaking cool there. Now, the last thing I really love about this deck, and this has nothing to do with, what I think, makes it just this amazing budget deck. Out of all the 400-something videos I've done on this channel, not once have I ever brought up a deck's lore. And this is the first time I'm doing it. This deck has some really cool lore to me. It's this very kind of like yin and yang kind of based deck that's also based off of the two Guardians of Buddha, essentially. One was like a master of fists, and the other was like a master of feet. So I think that's in its own is really cool. But then the tokens kind of have their own little lore where they're basically based off of this. I forget the name of the thing, but it's like a Chinese kind of like dog, dragon, demon thing. Like I just forget what they're called off the top of my head. Like I love those. I always thought those were cool as a kid. So seeing, basically the fusions where it's basically, fists and feet kind of like fusing with the spirits of those things, like it's relatively awesome. Like I just think the lore is just so interesting. I wish there was more to it, but sadly there isn't, and it's just so cool for what it is. 3, 2, 1. Now, obviously, I've spent this time talking about how I think this deck is good. I gotta talk about the downsides of the deck. So, first off, the deck is very one-trick pony. The deck really only does one thing, essentially, and that's make 2 fusions. While the deck has a really good grind game, and you can consistently do that pretty much every turn, it's a one-trick pony. Like, it's not the hardest thing to really stop. This deck just auto-loses to Nib, which, by the way, if you get Nibiru'd, if you activated Dual Avatar Invitation that turn, you do lose the token from Nibiru. Just throwing it out there, guys. And I think the other, just main big issue with this deck, essentially, is you're pretty much locked into only fusion summons. Like, that's the whole thing with this deck, is you just fusion summon. So this deck just hard also loses to Dimensional Barrier, which kind of sucks. But one thing that is pretty cool is the fact that the main deck the core takes up half the main deck and most of your extra. So you could essentially throw in a secondary engine, to basically help this deck out. And on top of that too, because you have so much space, there's just a lot you can really do with it, essentially. You could, put in a bunch of floodgate traps you wanted to and basically have a trap, like a trap heavy variant of the deck. You could throw in a secondary engine for like Invotes or Shaddolls, essentially. It's one of those things where like this, kind of sucks, but at the same time, like, you can use that to your advantage. Thank you guys so much for sticking to the end of the video. I hope y'all, liked this video and at least give dual avatars, a look at if you guys decide to not pick them up. No reason really not to. Like, you're losing what, at the most $10. But for those of you who are wondering, for like the few months I did take this deck to tournaments, I think the worst I ever got was 4th place. And I've gotten 2nd place a couple times with it. A couple different builds though, but I mean, it's just a really good solid deck, guys. So thank you guys so much for making it to the end of the video. Go ahead and harpoon that subscribe button. It helps the channel out. Harpoon that like button as well. That also helps the channel out, guys. Go ahead and comment any comments y'all have. Link in the description down below to my Instagram if you guys want to follow me on there. And I will see y'all in the next video, guys.